Welcome back. All right, I want to talk about my own personal journey today. I've done videos like this before on both channels. I'm going to do this today on the Entertainment Guy channel, thus the not hockey jersey being worn and all that. And I wanted to just go through, how this just kind of happened. So I graduated high school in 1991. I did not have the money for the post-secondary education that I was hoping to have. And so I kind of, took jobs here and there where I could. I worked at a ceramic shop for roughly a year and a half, which was great. Honestly, before YouTube, the most entertainment I had at a job, the most fun I had doing a job was probably mixing clay and working with ceramics. Really enjoyed working in a ceramic shop, which we don't have anymore, and it's too bad because I enjoyed pouring my own, making all my own stuff and finishing it, firing it, and painting it and all that. It was just great. It was so much fun. I had all kinds of dragons. If anybody's wondering where the ceramic dragons are, I gave them away. So I would make them. They were worth at least 50, $60 at the time. I would think if I'd done them now, I probably could have got $150, $200 for them because that was the mid 90s. So that's like 30 years ago. But I gave them away because I was like, and I think what influenced me to do that in part was, they'd get dinged up a little bit here and there with me handling them. And just, I was in my early 20s. I'd moved a couple of times. So I was concerned that they were going to get broke anyways. So it was like somebody come in, hey, I like that dragon. Do you want it? Take it. Done. So that was fun and everything, but it wasn't a full-time job. The full-time job came when I was working with poultry. I worked at a duck farm, and that was a lot of hard work, pretty steep learning curve when it came to that. Between the boss that liked to yell at everybody, the really all over the place hours. Like when you're working in agricultural, like meat processing, and I've done it twice, you really never know from one week to the next. You might end up getting really busy all of a sudden, or your hours die off. And they're like, no, we don't need you. You can go home. And you're asking yourself, so how am I going to pay my rent this month? Like it is that wildly inconsistent. With poultry, we started at 6:30 in the morning. I would show up at about 10 to 6 because I would try to get early work. So there were guys who would show up early, and if they weren't there right on that minute, the boss would look at me and go, all right, you get to work. And I'd be like, oh, cool. I get to start at 6 a.m. instead of 6:30. And I'd think, all right, I got that extra half an hour on my paycheck. So I was proactive. It wasn't as much about kissing up as it was about being able to pay rent, being able to buy food, being able to buy hockey cards, and all that fun stuff. So I did that, and then the raises got less and less of an incentive to stay. My last year there, for an entire year's work, my raise was 17 cents an hour, and I knew there were other people I worked with who got 20, 21, and I remember thinking to myself, well, why did they get more than I did? We made the same. What? So I was like, okay, so my work here doesn't matter. And so I found work at a call center, which paid better. I got more money to start at the call center, almost more money to start at the call center than I was making after 7 years working with poultry. So I was like, okay, this is a pretty easy call. And I went from the physically demanding job to the emotionally demanding job. Call center work is pretty thankless. It is go, 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 and then dead. And it's like you come in and it's suddenly there's an outage and it's ridiculously busy and there's 40, 50 calls waiting, and then that outage gets fixed, and then you might be waiting 10 minutes for a call. You might get a phone call from HR asking, do you want to go home? And so, call center work was kind of wildly fluctuating as well. I moved around between different contracts, learned what I could, and it wasn't fun. And I went from feeling like there was meat processing I did to processing people. It felt like there was so much turnover at the call center. I ended up doing training there, but there was a part of me that thought, why are we training some of these people? They're not going to make it. They're not going to last. And I would ask my supervisor, I'd say, they're not going to make it. And I know HR themselves had admitted the expectancy for your career at the call center was roughly 6 months. They knew that for your average, it was going to be 6 months and then you were out. Well, I lasted 7 years. I have this bad habit of getting jobs that people say, well, you're not going to last there. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And I lasted that crappy job for a long time. Which brings me to the meat processing plant that I worked from the call center. Now, working at a call center is not good for being in shape. So when I realized I wanted to go to the meat processing plant, which was within a walking distance of the call center, so it was no further from my home than the call center, and so I felt like I'm not in the shape for it. For all of the comments that I see online about the shape I'm in now, the reality is I was basically just sedentary for 7 years. I didn't do a lot of jogging. And if I did, it was short bursts, and it might be maybe once a week, maybe once every other week. Now, of course, I do as much jogging as I can. And so when I knew I was going to leave the call center, I did a lot more jogging. I tried to get in shape. I stopped going to the cafeteria as well, because the cafeteria at the call center, the food was delicious and like 11 billion calories. It was a lot. So I dropped some weight. I dropped about, I think it was 20 pounds, and I went to work at the meat plant. Still had a hard time adjusting to going back to physical labor. So with me being 5'4", the problem with the meat processing plants I've been in, they're designed for people who are 5'8" and taller. And that's just reality. So at both places, I would have situations where a boss would look me up and down and go, yeah, you can't do that job. And they'd point to somebody who was, half a foot taller than me, go, you do it. And then they sometimes couldn't keep up, and I would end up doing it instead. So I would learn to do jobs that were designed for somebody who was 5'8" or taller. And I kind of damned myself with that, because there were times where my shoulders would ache, my hips would ache, I was back pain, the whole bit, because I was doing jobs that weren't designed for me, that were designed for somebody much taller. But I was too stubborn to actually admit, I don't know if this is for me. So that determination and that stubbornness was there, is there, it's still part and parcel with me. But as this was going along, YouTube started to become a thing. And so, as I'm still working at the meat plant, I would come home every day and I would make YouTube videos, both on the main channel and on this one. So I had 2 YouTube channels I was trying to maintain while I was still working a full-time job. And sometimes with this one, I might be working 12-hour days. I might be working 6-day weeks. It was a lot, right? And then there were times too where I was working 5-hour days, and I could have had 4-day weeks if I'd wanted to. I got 5, but when you're only working 6 hours a day, it sure feels like 4. So the hours were kind of all over the place. But on those days when I'd be home really early, because I worked at 5:50 in the morning initially, and then I got a job in the shipping department where I would work at 4:20 in the morning. Cue laughter here. But that was my start time. And so I would be off every day at the latest at 1 o'clock, unless there was overtime, in which case it'd be 3 o'clock. But I'd get home early. And so I would do YouTube videos. And it was in part because I lived by myself. I didn't go out and have drinks with people. I didn't have very many friends. Very, very few friends anyways. And so, yeah, YouTube, it was a matter of me just firing up the webcam, doing videos, and that was it. It was a very, very crude setup, much cruder than it is now in terms of microphone, webcam, and all that. And so, yeah, eventually that started building up. Now, along the way, I also met my wife, right? So my wife and I met in 2016. It's been 7 years since we started talking, but we didn't actually start dating until months after we started talking online. And for me, I was really gun shy. I'd gone through a lot. We've got the video online on this channel on how we met each other. And, I was very much concerned about whether or not that was going to work. And keep in mind that, I'm doing my regular job. I'm doing YouTube videos. And I didn't stop when I started dating either. There were concerns on the hockey channel that he's going to get a girlfriend. He's going to stop making YouTube videos. No. All I knew was that I was making YouTube videos and that I was making money on those videos. I wasn't making my regular job. So while there was some mockery of how much money I was taking home from people I worked with at the regular job, like, well, why don't you just work overtime? That's nothing. And I was like, no, this is money I made not being here. This is huge. So eventually, YouTube built up to the point where I was able to take a day off if I was sick from my regular job. I know that sounds crazy, but I could not afford to take a day off sick for years. And so I would just wake up, I would feel awful with the flu or with a cold or whatever it was, right? And I would just medicate and go to work. Medicate and go to work. And I would sometimes I'd be like, I have to go home at lunch. I feel awful. But I'd be there, sharing my bug, whatever bug it was, with the whole staff. So eventually, because of the money being made on YouTube, I was like, I'm staying home. I'm not feeling well. I can do a YouTube video for 10 minutes. That'll generate like $5, which is $5 that I got not having to be there. But what happened eventually was we had a really bad snowstorm. And I ended up not being able to go to work that day. And so I did a full slate of YouTube videos. The money that I made that day on the YouTube videos ended up being roughly a third of what I would have made going to work. So I didn't lose anywhere near the amount of money that I normally would have as a result. So it kind of dawned on me like, okay, I could do this. And then there was a YouTuber convention meeting in Vancouver. We went to that. I got time off to go to that. And I got some useful tips from people who worked for YouTube on here's how you can make a little extra money on YouTube. Here's some hints and some tricks. And I implemented a couple of them. And sure enough, the income dodged up a bit. And I thought, okay, this can work. And so I had a long talk with Yvonne, my wife, and we agreed, yeah, you can do this. But I didn't have the faith that I could do it full time. I felt like I had to have a part-time job. I couldn't just be a YouTuber. So I went to TradeX, which is a local exhibition center, and I worked there as a first aid attendant. Now, I had my first aid, level 2 first aid at the meat processing plant. I'd gone in 3 different times for my level 2 first aid. And the third time it was because after it expired the second time, I still ended up doing it all the time anyways. There just weren't people that were interested. It wasn't worth the money. It was pretty thankless, and it meant you had to work a lot of hours sometimes too, because you were the only first aid attendant on. So, well, there's overtime, so you have to stay. And so it gets kind of taxing there, but it did help because then I was able to work at TradeX. And I worked there as a first aid attendant. I would sit at the front door. I had the red vest on, and it was fine. But eventually what happened was there. So the channel's still growing, and this is 2017, 2018. The Vegas Golden Knights have jumped into the NHL, and the Vegas Golden Knights in that story really fueled a lot of views, really fueled a lot of interest. And it just felt like Vegas was causing hockey to kind of blow up at the time, right? Just hockey in general, not just my channel. And so the income got to the point where if I worked at TradeX that day, I made less money than I did if I was just at home doing YouTube videos that day. So eventually we realized this doesn't necessarily work either. And I enjoyed working at TradeX. I thought they were very reasonable. If I needed time off, they were good about it. And it was as part-time as a part-time job can get. It's not really a full-time place to go. But as the playoffs approached, we realized, hey, during playoffs, I need to be watching those games. I need to be recapping those games. I need to be doing videos, and at that same time, TradeX was starting to get really busy. They had, I think it was the women's show that was coming up. I think it was the women's show, but it was one of these busier seasons that we were going into, and I realized that a lot of the days they were going to have me work were going to be very, very busy days for hockey, and it was not going to work. And so again, my wife sits me down and goes, you need to give your notice. You need to go full time as a YouTuber. And it was terrifying. Absolutely, completely, utterly terrifying. Because this was me saying, I'm gonna bet on myself. I'm going to throw down that this not usual path for a career is what I'm gonna do, right? So I did. I gave my notice. And I left, and I felt bad. I felt bad because the other first aid attendants then would have to pick up my shifts, and it just meant they had to redo the whole schedule. But it was playoffs, and I knew Vegas was a good story, and I had to be home. I had to be watching the games. There were times where, when I was at TradeX, I would have people on our Discord server sending me notes on what happened in certain games. And then I didn't like doing it that way because I'd go home and I'd talk about the games and I'd have people saying, well, what are you talking about? You said this happened in the game, but that's not how it really happened. So I realized the notes had to come from me. Anything on the main channel had to be my information and my opinion, because if it was somebody else's, I couldn't defend it. I couldn't really explain it. So I'd be like, "Oh, this happened last night." No, it didn't. I was told that it did. I'm sorry. It just it didn't sit right. So to this day, I feel like it has to be from me. It's one of the reasons why it's me on this channel. It's me on the main channel. I think that's really important. I've watched as other YouTubers have, gotten other hosts, or they've made big changes and things. Sometimes they work and sometimes it nosedives. And so, since I feel fine, I don't feel like I'm getting burnt out. I feel good. So from 2016 until now, I've been, paid for YouTube videos. It started in June of 2016. So yeah, we're past 7 years now. Now, the author thing is interesting, and I do have an end date on that at 2015. And it's not a coincidence that at the time YouTube starts to go, my authoring stopped. And it really is a matter of time. I don't have the amount of time to write a book that I did before. Now, some of the new AI stuff kind of makes me excited. Like, okay, wait a minute. I could use AI and I might be able to get a really good book going. But at the same time, I would feel kind of like a fraud. If I used AI to help me write a book, I'd pretty much feel like a fraud. And so if anybody in Hollywood's thinking about using AI and then just bringing in writers to punch it up, which apparently is the rumor, that's fraudulent. To me, it's fraudulent. To me, it has to be, human mind comes up with the storyline, not just computer goes, here you go, A, B, C. Movies have already become way too predictable, and just everything mirrors everything else as it is. I look back on movies from the 80s, early 90s, I'm like, these are all individual different movies. And now it just all feels very similar, comparatively speaking. But my authoring days ended in 2015. I hope at some point in time that I can start writing again. And when I mean writing, it's fiction. It's not nonfiction. I've thought about doing a book on my life story, but A, I don't think it's interesting enough. I really don't. I mean, this is basically it. I don't think it's interesting enough, and B, I don't feel like I'm done writing that story either. I don't feel like there's an end point right now. And so since I'm still writing the story, I'm good. So it's been 2,252 days by my count since I left my last job and became a full-time YouTuber. And, I still get comments here and there about, well, don't quit your day job. This is it. I did quit my day job, and it's actually worked out pretty well. Without this life, without having met Yvonne, and I really think that's part of it. She and I differ on this. I think that the channel was starting to improve, and that when I met her and I stopped being sad and angry all the time, that my content got better. I stopped swearing as well because, YouTube was talking at the time about coarse language can get you demonetized, and I was like, all right, I can do that. I can just cut out the swearing. I'll just pretend I'm at church. That was my old church thing, was if I was at church or around my grandmother, I would watch what I said too. Really never swore in front of my grandmother. I know this may sound like a generation thing, but at that stage in my life and with the people around me that I had when I was a teenager, we had a certain amount of respect for adults. There were some adults that might have got flipped off here and there, but it was rare. It was very, very rare. That we might have had some words for as well, but that was rare as well. The one incident that comes to mind was the MP on the base. So you have your military police on the base, which is, it's police and it's not police. So it's not, they're not police outside of the military base. But my friends and I, we were riding our bikes, and it was just like PMQ streets. Just there was no traffic, and there was an MP that yells out his window, "Watch your bikes." And we're like, okay. And then about 2 blocks later, he yells at us, "I told you to get off those bikes. You don't have lights on them." And we said, "You told us to watch the bikes. You didn't say get off the bikes." And then you're arguing with me, and we're like, whatever, fine. That's as close to lipping anybody off as we got. Other than the guy who got mad at us once because we were playing soccer in the schoolyard on a weekend, and he felt like it was too early in the morning for that. friend of mine too was like, "Ah, you want to come out here and do something about it?" I'm like, "Dude, what are you doing? Come on, we're just playing soccer. We don't have to turn this into a fight." But at any rate, yeah, it is different now than it was then, and all of that. I have to have the old man rant. It has to be in there because if the old man rant and the meander's not in there, people are gonna be like, something's wrong with Shannon today. He's not doing the old man thing. So it's been a long time that I've done the full time YouTube thing, and I was inspired to do this today because it would appear that Steve Dangle's doing the same thing now, going to the Steve Dangle Podcast Networks full time, and that's great for him, and it's great for them. And his work on Sportsnet, it just part of what it shows me too though is that I always get asked, well, would you go work at Sportsnet? And my answer is always, I mean, I guess, but I see way too many people quitting or getting fired. Traditional media and sports, there's way too many people who get fired, and stations just get shut down. So radio stations get shut down. TV networks can change hands, and all of a sudden shows are canceled, and there's no stability. And it feels like, at least with YouTube, there's some stability. I'm able to produce content when I want to. I'm my own boss. So if I wake up tomorrow and I go, I don't think I feel like doing videos today, I don't have to. That doesn't happen. And tomorrow it's the Stanley Cup playoffs, and I've got brand new magnets for that. So I'm excited about that because why not? But it is a very different life. And, when I see somebody else taking that jump and betting on themselves, I'm proud of them and I wish them the best. I do think that traditional media, I mean, it's still useful. There's still people in traditional media that do very good work, but it definitely feels like the landscape has completely and totally changed, and there's an adaptation process that's gone on. And yeah, I'm glad to be a part of it. I am far older than 99% of YouTubers, of course, but I think that works to my benefit as well. I know there was a video I was doing the other day on the hockey channel where I was getting set up to do a video, and I thought to myself, I don't know why I'm doing this. I mean, everybody remembers this. And then it occurred to me, the demographics, according to my channel, most people that watch my channel are in their early 20s. So then, no, they wouldn't know that information. They would have no idea because they're not my age. So I kind of have to pivot that way and say, okay, I can do these videos on things that happened in the early 2000s, well aware that a large portion of my viewer base would not remember that, wouldn't have watched that. And so it's important to me to impart this knowledge while I can, because you never know how much time you have on this spinning globe going around the sun before your time is done. So I really I appreciate every moment that I have on this platform. I think it's been great for me personally. I know that my wife's very thankful too. And this summer, we're really looking forward to going on an adventure. We hit Vegas and then we hit Disneyland. This summer, we're doing a 10-day trip, 3 days in one. It's 10 altogether. It's 3 days, then there's a travel day, and then 5 days in Disneyland before we go back home, with a rest day in the middle where we're going to have like a meetup with people. But it is an enjoyable life, and I'm very grateful. And the one thing is, having all of this time in jobs that people didn't want. Really, by the time I left that poultry plant, I was top 10 in seniority out of the entire place. When I left the call center, I had seniority on most of the plant. And in the meat processing plant, after almost 10 years, I had seniority on almost everybody. So it is something that, I've been able to stick it out at jobs that most people didn't like and would quit quickly. And I never sugarcoated it. So when people were like, well, it'll get better, I would say, nope. If you're miserable now, it doesn't get better. You don't wake up one day and go, hey, I really enjoy this all of a sudden. It doesn't. So if you don't like it, that this is not the job for you. But YouTube, I do genuinely enjoy. There are days where, there's a lot of ambient noise in the background that I can't do anything to control. But if that's my worst complaint, that's a pretty good job. If my worst complaint is I have writer's block, so I have a hard time coming up with a video concept, and that does happen on the hockey channel far more than here. This channel is so broad. I had wanted to do something, for instance, on Live Golf, merging with the PGA, but there's so much out there right now, I didn't feel like I could add anything to it. I feel like everybody's already, got their opinions on that, and everybody's already weighed in, and anything I say would just, not really be much. Other than, a corporation will take a principled stand until money. And then money means money. So when you have money, then money. And it's really important to money. That's how I see it. But anyways, there you go. A little bit of an extra at the end there. So for people who might be discouraged, so coming back to other videos I've done on this channel where I talk about depression, I've talked about loneliness, and I know I've had people talk about, well, I can't find a girlfriend. Yeah, I was in my 40s when I met Yvonne, and I got it wrong plenty before that. And I think there's two pieces of advice I would give, if anything else. A, if you're not happy in your life, don't be afraid to make a change. Whether it's a relationship, whether it's a job, whatever it is, don't be afraid to make a change, because you're not doing anybody any favors staying in a job or a relationship where you're not happy. And two, it can get better. I'm not going to say it will, because that's the tricky part, but it can. And as long as you have that belief that things can get better, it's easier to get up in the morning. It's easier to do that crappy job. And it's easier to deal with the endless rejection that is online dating. Believe me, before I met Yvonne, I was mostly single for about 2 years. And there wasn't a whole lot there. I did date one lady who was very nice for a while there, but it didn't have what I eventually found with Yvonne. So at any rate, it can happen. It can work out. And yeah, so there's my sunshiny moment at the end of this for all you fine people on the internet. So, all right, there you go. Let me know your thoughts, as always, in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Notice, from 1991 to 1994, I was working part-time jobs and just, wherever I could to make some income. And then I got the full-time job and made that work. So if you're feeling kind of shiftless and like you don't know what to do, yeah, I was right there too. And I was there for a very, very long time. So it does happen. All right. Thanks again for all your support. It means a lot. If you haven't already hit like and subscribe, go ahead and do so. I will talk to you again soon.